Strong Dads wants to thank 4Speed on 50 for sponsoring today's show. If you like classic cars, great food, and a taste of Americana, you have to visit 4Speed on 50's Diner, located on Route 50 in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Stop in today for a meal and an experience you won't soon forget at 4Speed on 50's Diner. Welcome to Strong Dads. This is Merle Hutchinson and Carl Andrew bringing you another great
show.
How you doing, Carl?
I'm doing good. Yeah. Thanks.
Good.
You?
Good.
Yeah.
We had a pretty good weekend and everything. And so you asked me a little earlier how my knee's doing, and I'd say it's a little better. So that's how I rate my days these days. How's the knee?
Joints get up in the morning.
I'm walking. Okay, it's a great day. Yeah. So we're going to tackle something today that I think a lot of people, a lot of you guys out there, are probably in this situation. I'm sure there's different stats on this, but I come into a general stat. About 50% of the families right now are somehow dealing with what we're going to talk about, and that is the blended family. Yeah, the blended family. And so, I think, the Brady Bunch. Remember the Brady Bunch?
Yeah, that was reality.
Yeah, and so you watch the shows like that, and you go, yeah, it'll work. It'll work, and it can work. So I don't want to come off in a way like, oh, yeah, it's a no win. But it's not easy.
No.
So just for a second, let's just, if it's okay with you, give a little glimpse of your blended situation. I'll give a little bit of mine just so people can kind of see where we might be coming from.
Okay. Well, I would say this. When I got married, I was 38. I did not get married till I was older. Yeah, I was an old man. Yeah. And my wife had two children, two wonderful people, two great kids. And that one was 18 and the other one was 13 when we actually got married. So much older. I will say this. I'm a book learner. I learned to ski from a book, and people laugh about that.
Not YouTube?
No, back then. Well, we go back 40 years. YouTube wasn't really even on the horizon then. But there was this book called We Learned to Ski, and I went with a family up to Michigan who'd been skiing for years, decades. And within a day, I'm skiing with them. I'm a book learner. Once I understood how a ski worked, the mechanics, it worked. It just came naturally. So
you're one of those guys who reads the instructions before you build something.
Well, I didn't want to look stupid too. I wanted to go up there. I did get run off of one Black Diamond Hill though, so I wasn't as good as I thought I was. But when I went to get married, I looked there, and I don't know about today. I mean, there is YouTube now and things like that. But there just wasn't a lot on blended family. It's just, there's a lot of books on marriage. There's a lot of books that way, as far as opinions. So I really went we made some mistakes. There were a lot of things we assumed. Mm-hmm. And if I had to do it over, there's things I would do differently. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I would say it worked. Regardless of everything we talk about here today, We've stayed, this will be 25 years. Yeah. The relationship works. The kids are great. So it's hard to say I would change these things but I think from a personal standpoint, there are definitely things I would change. We'll talk about some of that.
Yeah. Well, our situation is just that Linda and I had two of our sons, biological sons, and everything was good and great and everything. And they actually all went off and started doing their own thing, college and military and all that. And then the opportunity came for us to adopt. And so we had been empty nesters for 4 years.
Yeah.
And
that's a radical shift.
Well, and I liked empty nesting. So that was the thing. It wasn't like I had this craving for something else. I was like, man, this is some freedom here. But anyway, the opportunity came, and there was a lot of head spinning going on for me. I was struggling. Linda, I think, jumped in. Maybe her emotions drove it, but she was more on the yes bus than I was initially. But once I got to the yes bus, there was no turning back. But in my brain, this is just so weird. I thought, it's going to take about 6 months or so. Then we'll be a family.
Yeah.
And 4 years later, I was like, when's this going to happen? It really did. Like the adjustment period.
Yeah.
And now we're about 9 years in. And I would, it's not like the adjustments there. Like but I think like how they think, how they do things, culture.
I call it the culture.
It just was like, I don't understand it. And that just took forever. So anyway, that's a little bit of my story, but it kind of comes into some of the stuff we'll talk about, and you guys can take it however you need to.
I would say this, not to be a Debbie Downer. I've talked on here in the Pride podcast about dealing with alcohol, losing a fortune and going broke, and how difficult that was. Blended family is the toughest thing I've ever done. I mean, consistently, because it's there. It's your daily, it's your life that you're kind of working your way through. So and I think those Pride broadcasts would be really good, because a lot of what I dealt with was pride.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll second what you just said. Our adoption of our kids, hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah. Which was frustrating for me, because I just didn't think it would be.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we're going to get more into some of the detail of this. I think ultimately what we want to do is give you some how-tos, like if we could do it over again, or open up our eyes a little bit more, some things to be aware of, right? Some pitfalls. Before we do, we want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank Quality Auto Mart, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and 4Speed on 50 Diner. Cool place. All these places down in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, except for Quality Auto Mart. I'm sorry, that's headed out towards the Batesville.
Yeah.
So if you're doing any business with those guys and you're listening to this show, tell them thanks. We appreciate them. We also want to thank all of you guys as you listen to our show. We appreciate the listens. We also appreciate the shares, because I think that's where people are listening and they're paying attention and they're going, this could be helpful. So whether it's helpful to you or not, maybe it could be to somebody else. So please help with sharing us. So, all right.
Before we jump into this, we're doing a blended family, and I didn't ask you this before. How much of this is really not so much blended family as it's just being a good parent, or that role of parenting that maybe we make an assumption it's so different here. How much of this really is just about being a parent,
right?
A great father. Mm-hmm. So maybe we're delineating that maybe too much when we talk about blended families as we go forward here, because some of these things I look at and go, I should have learned this anyway.
Yeah, well, there's this weird concept, biblical, of unconditional love.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That.
Like, you had to bring that up, yeah. And versus conditions on. Like, when you kids start to behave more like I think you should behave, then I'll love you, right? And so there were lots of preset conditions I know in my mind, like this is how it ought to be.
Right.
And it wasn't coming out that way, which is frustration and anger and tension. And
you keep pulling the same tool out of the tool chest thinking it's going to work, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, all right.
So how about let's just quickly run through some of the more common challenges that people run into. One of the first ones, and maybe the phrase might change a little bit, but I'm just going to call it the step-parent acceptance. So the acceptance, we'd like to be that guy who walked in your case, into the lady's house, and the kids said,
da, 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 da.
"Hey, stepdaddy," right? And they all grabbed you and they loved you happily ever
we've been
after.
waiting for you.
Yeah. But it didn't happen that way, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
No, it didn't for me. I don't. Maybe it happens for somebody. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so the idea there, is that they probably still have a biological parent hanging out in the limbs, right? I mean, so in your case, they had a biological father. In our case, we still had mom and dad. But over the years, the connection with their dad has been great, and you quickly realize. And so, if you are thinking and considering this, you're not the dad.
Yeah, and you never will be.
Yeah.
I mean, you may become a father figure, and you may become a father of sorts, but blood, they always saying the blood is thicker than water.
Yeah.
That there's just a connection there you're never going to have with a child that you didn't father biologically.
Yeah.
And the whole process. I've never had children of my own, so I know that there's a bond, though. There's just a natural bond when you start life together, and it's part of your life and everything. So I think it's being realistic to say, don't have such high expectations.
Yeah.
I would say, if I could, some of the things that going into it, we didn't. Kids. I want to say this: kids have it tough.
Yeah.
Quite often, a parent is out there finding somebody, and then they want to get married, and they're kind of thrusting this person. You're a stranger.
Yeah.
You're a stranger coming into a family, trying to make a family, and the kids quite often they're generally accommodating initially and everything like that. But I think I talked to you a while back about the chaos.
Yeah.
And we didn't really give enough attention to the dynamic going in, figuring that it would work its way out.
Yeah.
And you just think it'll work its way out. You put your energy toward it, everything. We probably should have done more work early on that way to be sure everybody was more comfortable, because you're trying to put together people that are vastly different in a lot of cases.
Well, it's weird work because it's different. There's not a set style, and I think another thing is not just step parent acceptance, but then the stepchild, like you accepting them.
Right.
And you and I were talking a little bit before the show. When our biological kids did a behavior of sorts, you could say, "Yep, that's just like your family." That's just because you can connect it. You've understood. You see personality traits. You see the trail, and at least even if you don't like the trail, you go, "I recognize it." And when you are trying to accept these new kiddos, they do things. And you're totally out of the loop in terms of the nature loop, the biological loop. And you're going, why would a kid ever think that way? Or why would and that completely threw me off.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand that. And then me trying to get over it and kind of loving the kids for who they are, where they are, versus you should be more like I think you should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a challenge for me. I know you and I have talked, like you and your stepson, like sometimes you're just on different wavelengths.
Well, he just chose a very different. He's a great man. He's just a great man. I have a great deal of respect for him. We just took vastly different paths in lives.
Yeah.
In fact, in a lot of ways, I can't relate. And that's something that I think we talked. You mentioned it earlier. I always say the culture in the house. One of the things that I wanted, I think if I had it to do over again, my wife wanted to stay in the same house. Because she felt the kids had had enough disruption.
Yeah.
That was very difficult because you're coming into...
For you.
Yes.
Yeah.
To their home.
Yeah.
It's their home, and you're an outsider. I think neutral territory would be better. Again, things worked out, but it was funny. If I could real quick, there was a little half wall in our house.
Yeah.
That was just a pain in the butt. I mean, it really broke. It was just, to me... And I had thought about taking it out, and it's like, no, it's always been this way. It's so you realize it's their house, and you are the stranger in there, and it was just in the way. It was just it was from those '80s, and they didn't have the open concept.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there when they left one day. I think I told you. I'm not proud of this, but with no tools. I want to make this clear. The thing is hammered into the wall. Well, the half walls between the family room and the kitchen. And I come up out of the chair. I was younger, and I pulled that thing out of the floor.
Like a loose tooth. You just kept working
I
it.
just got a hold of that. It'd break me up today. And then I hauled it out through the front door and threw it in the front yard like a trophy. So when they came home,
You're a jerk.
I am a jerk. I've done some jerky things. I really have. But that wall was coming out of there and today it's so much better. I mean, it was one of those things that
whether they think so or not,
they would say so because it opened up the room and everything like that. But it was like that was those kinds of things when you're coming into that situation. It may be the wall. It may be something else.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things like that the culture has been, especially if you've got older kids. In a home like that, there's an environment, a culture, the way things work. And now you're coming in and you're going to upset that some way because you've got your style and you've got your things. So you're going to be in Yeah,
I don't know the answer to that either because I hear what you're saying. Like you moved into their territory and you said, I think it would have been better if we gone to neutral. But I still see then, depending on what neutral looked like to the kids, right? Like if they fell in love with it, the neutral house is now a mansion with a swimming pool and all that.
That wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. But if the neutral house if they don't quite like it, now there's resentment that this is not my house and you're the one who moved me out of it. So like I can see the challenge on both sides of that one.
There's two sides of that issue.
Yeah.
And a lot really will come down to what I talked about earlier, pride.
Yeah,
you're going to have to swallow your pride, and having good boundaries. I think that's a big key there. That was something that, and personally, I still say it needed done. It was it was an improvement. It was just different, and people fight different. So it's a tough thing.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads us to another thing that people should be aware of. People fight different. People parent different.
Oh, yeah.
Differing parenting styles. Yeah. So now you're coming in and you're not the biological parent, but at the end of the day, there's parental loci, right? Or loci. So that's, if your wife's gone and the kids and you are there, you're the man in charge, right?
Well,
but if you do things that are totally different. So I will say Linda and I have always been very connected on our parenting style. Even though we might be different in personality, we, with our biological kids and with the new adopted kiddos that we brought in, and people don't like when I call them that, but I just don't know how to separate how to refer to the different situation that we had to deal with. But we were on the same page with how to parent, and so that really did help us a lot. So how about with you?
I'd say if I did one thing right, is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We were very blessed in the fact that the kids were good kids.
Yeah.
I hear horror stories.
Yeah.
I'm just really blessed. So I might have had my way that I thought was better.
Right.
But I didn't come from the best background either. I look at that and go, what I brought to the table really may not have really worked in that situation, what I thought. So I'm not saying I was a wimp or anything like that. And I will say this. One of the mistakes I made, and it's very hard, is catching my spouse in the middle. We would have a lot of tension. We had a lot of nights where we would go to sleep and we were talking about frustrations. So she has 2 children that she loves. And I like the kids and I respect the kids and I was happy about the kids, but there were things that that would be difficult that I would wrestle with that I knew you just can't bring up all the time, know. So you're trying to, so your spouse gets caught in the middle and they love their kids, and I think it took me a while to realize the strain that I was putting on my wife by complaining and just being in general and sometimes just aggravated, and there's some things you just can't do really anything about. You're just going to have to just weather that and wait and be patient. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Well, and I mean, I'll jump ship just a little bit on because you got me thinking about it, and that is, when Linda and I work with couples all the time, we stress, hierarchy of relationships, God first, spouse second, kids third. That is not the case with these blended families.
No.
You may not like it, but it really can't be. It has to be first God, and then second, especially early on, you've got to honor the relationship that
correct
that parent has with their kids.
Correct.
If you're the one moving in, you've got to honor it, and that leads me to the parenting styles. Especially guys don't like to hear this, but I tell them, listen, when it comes to discipline, she's going to have to be the primary disciplinarian until there's a level of trust.
Yeah.
Right. If they don't trust you, and I don't know how long that process takes, but if they don't trust you, you have to defer. Now, behind closed doors, you could say, hey, I don't know if I understand what you're doing.
Right.
But out in front of those kids, she has to be the front person.
Right.
And that drives people crazy. They want to say, well, the kid's doing the wrong thing. This is what they should do. It's like, no, you don't have the credibility to even speak that way in those kids' life.
Right. And I don't know if this is encouraging. I think I shared with you a coworker years ago who raised his stepdaughter from an infant, and they had a great marriage. I thought they did, and when she got to be in her teens to late teens, there was a whole parenting issue, and he was trying to, he felt it should be one way, it should be another, and she divorced him. And I was shocked. I mean, they had
that many years
later that what you're talking about, that hierarchy there, no matter, and I hate to be this way, or maybe this is not correct, or maybe I just haven't lived this. There is a different bond. It should be when you get married, you after God, you and your spouse. But that isn't the case.
Yeah.
There will always be that connection there that you need to honor, that you're not going to have. And if you try to insert yourself too much in there, you're headed for trouble.
Yeah, there's this instinctive protective bond.
Right.
Like I'm thinking of the mama bear, right? Like I'm thinking like, well, I love you all the way, but when you cross that line with my kids, they become her kids at that point, right?
And that's the thing I say. It's really difficult. If you're going into a blended family, you're expected to be the father and to do fatherly things, but the kids can step in and out of that role. You're not my dad. And I will say this, they never said that to me.
Yeah.
And I want to say something else that as far as what I didn't do, and I don't recommend it. I never required the kids to call me dad. I'd see people that bring even a new person, well, this is, call him dad or call her mom, everything. That's just so confusing. You either are doing that role or you're not.
Yeah.
And there's an old saying, it's amazing what can get done as long as nobody cares who gets the credit.
Yeah.
So if your pride is such that you got to have that, well, you're probably headed for trouble.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring that up, because I just didn't think about that prior. When we adopted our kids, we had to go through the whole process. Well, will they keep their name, the name that they were born with, last name, or will they take on your name, or there will be some blending of it, whatever that is,
or something.
We had a conversation with the kids. What do you guys want to do? And one of my concerns was, I just don't want 20 different names running around the house. I got like, well, this is this kid. Like, can we go with one name?
Sort of like George Foreman.
Yeah.
George 1, George 2.
Yeah. And so I hope our kids didn't feel like we strong-armed them. I mean, I don't feel like we strong-armed them, but they all agreed to take our name on. And so that becomes a legal matter. Like on all their birth certificates and all that.
You got a lot to change.
Yeah, all that came to that. And then there was a question of what will they call us? And at the time they were 11, 10, and 7 years old. And I'm not sure if they felt strong-armed into that. We said, what do you want to call us? And they all came to the idea of dad and mom. But that's really weird. Right? Because even now they got 2 dads.
Yeah.
They got 2 moms. And so I don't know the right answer on that one. It would have been weird for my 7-year-old to call me Merle or Hutch or whatever people would call me. It would be weird to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't.
Well,
they never called you dad. They called you just Carl.
I'm Carl. Yeah. I'm Carl.
But they were 18 and 13.
Yeah, and I would say this. I want to be very careful here. This is a needle we have to thread this, because there's a lot of people involved in this. When you get married, you're marrying an ex.
Oh, yeah.
If there's an ex in the picture. In our case, there was a lot of animosity, and the kids get caught in the middle, and you need to understand that. So there was probably never even a chance that was going to slip out.
Yeah.
Because it got to ridiculous stages. So learning to contain, whether you like it or not, when you get married into a blended family, if the spouse is still alive, if there's that animosity, it's another member of your family.
Yeah.
You're going to deal with, and you're going to have this influence in. And I don't want to badmouth anybody, but that was a really difficult aspect, and the kids really get caught in the middle of that. I think you need to understand. And you're going to see somebody else parent. You're talking about parenting. Yeah. They're going to do things that you don't necessarily agree with.
Exactly.
And you don't have a say-so in that. You're going to watch this play out. You go, and you might be even the safety kind of issue, and you might voice your opinion. That doesn't mean you have any right.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do. So you've got that dynamic over here, and a parent that might be jealous, or a parent that's angry, or a parent that's antagonistic that way might use or force the children into a situation where they're almost pawns.
Yeah.
Where they're worried about somebody calling somebody else dad, or somebody else calling somebody mom.
Yeah, what you're talking about is one of the hardest individual things I've ever experienced. Our kid's biological father, he was in prison at the time, and the mom had already signed away the rights, and he had not. But until he did, nothing could happen with the kids. They were going to stay in foster care.
In limbo.
Yeah. And so they brought him up from the prison and brought him up to the courthouse, and we were asked to be there, and we were going to have a hearing. And he had said back in the prison, I'll sign the rights over, okay? So he shows up at the courthouse, and first time I ever saw him. And, he's in an orange jumpsuit, the whole thing. It's handcuffed, everything.
What a first impression.
Yeah. And first time he ever saw me.
Yeah.
And I saw a man. I didn't, before then he was a figure. I saw a man, and he came in and he saw me. We looked at each other, and he said to the court, he's like, I'm not signing.
First thing out.
Yeah. He goes, I can't do it. I can't do it. Everything went on hold. Here we are in the courthouse. And we are like, what do we do here? Like, what do we do? And I said, can I speak with him? And he and I just met privately, and he's crying, and I'm crying. And he's like, I can't do it. These are my kids.
Yeah.
And that was the first time, like, I realized this is, I
being.
knew it, but I didn't feel it at that level. And I'm like, as all I can tell you, I'm not going to try to replace you. I'm just going to try to give them an opportunity. That's all I want to do. Stuck in this foster world is really not helping anyone.
Right.
And I think, obviously, he saw some honesty and authenticity, and he said, where's the paper? I'll sign. I have honored him because of that decision. And he and I we're friendly towards each other. I won't say we're friends because we don't hang out together, but we're friendly. But as you said, like, you got to honor that there's another man in their life, or another woman possibly. You've got to honor that. If you minimize that, you're just going to destroy everything.
Right.
Sorry, I went on that tangent, but that just hit me.
And you were talking. I want to back up to something and you said something about the name, the changing of the name. One of the mistakes I made was there was a pet name that our daughter had. And that's how they referred to her.
Yeah.
That's how my wife referred to her. And I thought, well, that's how I'm supposed to refer to her. Don't assume that is your territory, that you are privileged to use that.
Yeah.
And that was one of the few things that was ever said. So that's a special name just between the parents.
Yeah.
And I didn't, I never even thought of that. So don't make those assumptions. There's territories that are theirs alone.
Yeah.
You didn't start that. That's not part of the heritage or whatever it is. And I can honor that.
Yeah,
I
that's a great point. Yeah, that. Somebody else established it, and now you're trying to use it.
It's a special, that pet name or whatever it is. It may be something else too. It could be an item. It could be whatever. There's things like that you need to be more aware of. Don't assume that you can just do those things.
Yeah.
And I just never even thought about it. It just kind of blindsided me, and I felt bad. I apologized for it. So.
Yeah. Some other things I think we're talking about this, and I hope you guys find this, like, we're talking very real here as we work through it ourselves, and hopefully you're seeing some of this. But building trust and bonds, because they're going to be different. So when you go through the adoption process, before you do that, you have 6 months of trial. Okay, and it is this like putting your toe in the water. Is this going to work? And probably about a month in. Our youngest one, young Nick, we have two Nicks, by the way. We're our older Nick,
there.
So our little Nick, we call him. He just looked at Lynn and I straight up, and he's like, "Why are you even doing this?" This is a 7-year-old.
Wow.
Why are you even doing this? Because you have to remember, he was a student in my school, and he was in my office every other day due to trouble.
You know me, right?
And he was like, "Why are you even doing this?" And the point being is, he didn't trust us.
Yeah.
He didn't
trust us.
What
would be your motive?
What's your motive?
Yeah.
Why would anyone do this?
this?
Because he'd already been in 5 foster care settings.
Yeah.
And so they come and they go, they tend to not trust anyone. How long will I be here? And so when he questions, like, Lynn and I had to realize, wow, like, he has no trust that this is ever going to work out, and that he has no idea who we are. We assume that he's going to think we're great and we're taking him in. And it's like, no. You're going to have to show him, build trust with him, and, of course, all the other kids. And that's been a process.
Yeah.
Right. So how about you, like building the bond or the trust, I should say? How long did it feel like it took for those kids to go, we trust who he is as a man?
Oh, I don't know. You'd have to ask them that. I don't
Yeah.
know that I could ever put my finger on it. We still have vastly different ways of looking at life. So I think there's times it comes up that's like, really? You know, that I'm a kind of I used to embarrass our daughter. I whistle a lot and I sing when I'm out, you know. So, you know, when the kids are teens, you know, that trust issue is a real problem because you never know what might come out, you know, and that's kind of embarrassing. So there's different ways. But I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know that I could ever say that it is there. I think there's an old saying, time either exposes or promotes you. Mm-hmm. And I think you just got to be like water on rock. There was a time in our marriage, I should say, that I just felt you just got to be like water on rock. You just got to be who you are and say this, and it wasn't always good. You just got to let the weight of who you are rest on them. And they'll make their decision. And you can't force these issues. And I want to say, though, my life is so much better. And we're talking about the difficulties. I think going into it, and you talked about here, or one of your things is love is blind. It is so easy to get wrapped up in an individual and not see these things. Yeah. And we're talking about the difficulties and things. My life is so much richer.
Yeah.
So much richer. And you really need to make sure that is the love of your life. Yeah. Because that may be all you have to hold on to at different times when things get difficult. Because pride is a big issue, a big issue for me, and the dynamics and the culture and all this that you're working through. But in the end, my life is so much richer from that standpoint.
I'm going to clarify, for me at least, richer does not mean easier.
No.
So we had some family battles prior. This is family outside of our kids before we adopted, and our family questioning us, like, what are you doing? Like empty nesters 4 years, right? Like you're on a level of easy street.
You're in cruise mode.
You're cruise, you know. And so there was a question and really some pushback, some heavy pushback, like, what are you doing? And so what I would say to what you're like, we didn't jump into anything, and we would never say this has been easy. It was the hardest decision, and it continues to be a hard part of our life.
Right.
But it definitely has made us better people. Yeah. We have been humbled around so many corners. We teach a parenting class. It's a court-ordered parenting class. And we tell them right off the bat, we kind of give a little scenario of what our family is. And we say, you need to know every struggle that you have as a parent, we have. We have dropped the ball so many times. You know, like we don't have this down pat. Yeah. We're in the process. And I think the humility that's had to come from this process, we did all the shows on pride, like, I'll be the last guy to tell you that I'm a great parent because of the fumbles, the words that have come out of my mouth that I couldn't get back fast enough.
Yeah, sometimes you say things that you can't roll back ever.
Yeah. I mean, and to think that you're not going to scar the kids, no, you're going to wound them. Just now, we shouldn't intentionally wound anyone, but there's just going to be attitudes or words that come out, and you won't be able to reel them back in fast enough, but they will permeate. And I've done that, and I was like, now one thing I've had to learn to do is to apologize. Like, man, I just did not need to go there. I'm sorry. Like that, I was a jerk, which is never easy. So anyway, like,
well, you know,
richer but not easier.
Right. And on that note, pick your battles well. If I was going to say one thing, you really got to ask, is this really important? Is this worth going on the sword for?
Yeah.
All the pettiness and stuff like that you can get wrapped around in, whether you're a biological parent or a parent in life, whatever it is, it's something that there's a saying about marriage. You should be wide-eyed, wide open, eyes wide open before marriage, half closed after.
Yeah.
I'd say maybe 3/4 closed after with step kids, blended family, that you really need to pick your battles well. It's got to be worth it. It's got to be and people could define that differently, but pick your battles well. I mean, you can get into a real petty. It's a ball of crap to put it bluntly, and it just keeps going around and around. There's a lot of things that just in the whole scheme of things are not really important.
Yeah. Oh, we're in that really deep right now. And it's just like sometimes you want to. Do we really want to argue and create a tension over whether their bed is made or not? And you may have grown up all your life with the bed made,
Make
right?
your bed.
Everybody makes their bed here. This is what we do. But if you're going to spend all that energy beating it up, because listen, your kid has the right to put their feet in the ground, right? They can be stubborn. They start to experience free will.
They start to become an adult.
Yeah. And so, we haven't mastered that picking battles well. I mean, we're working through it.
Yeah.
But you're right, man, because sometimes you get into the petty stuff and you're like, okay, we got 3 weeks into this petty little talk we're doing, and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So you've got a few more things here.
Yeah, so, I do think it's important to watch how you're interacting with the kids and with your new spouse. If you're getting there, keeping it towards the positive. If you're constantly in the negative, it really is exhausting. I think the idea of open communication is really important. And when I think of open communication, communicating with your new spouse here on how are we going to do this, trying to lay things out beforehand versus in real time, you just spraying out what you think. So the idea of, and that, by the way, you mentioned before, like, shouldn't we just do that in marriage anyway? When we're raising kids, we talk all the time, before you have this conversation with your kids, did you vet it out well behind closed doors,
right,
so that the two of you know how you're going to come about this?
So that you're unified.
Yeah.
There's some things you should not flesh out in the moment.
In real time,
In real time.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that we lose track of, when you go into this, I think personally, real quick, I think having overly high expectations sets you up. This is difficult.
Yeah.
And I think if you go into it knowing that, you're better off than if you think it's all going to be unicorns, rainbows, and butterflies, and everybody's going to get along. Back to what I said earlier, when you put groups of people together, there's the pseudo community that people do, where they're glad handing and everything like that. But if you're together long enough, you will hit chaos. When the gloves come off and you can only put on a front so long.
Yeah.
And if you're not prepared for that to happen, it might take 6 weeks, it might take a month, it might take a year, who knows? But there's going to be that moment. There's going to be something like that to where you're going, wow, this isn't what I thought. And if you're not prepared, if you think it's all easy, but what I was going to say is I'm so aware of how many biological parents have kids that don't talk to them. Mm-hmm. So even under the best of circumstances, what I would call the best, the tightest, most should be the most enduring bond, those are broken. It's parenting is difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, you're saying it.
Yeah.
And there's more dynamics here, but even in the biological side of it, a number of people don't.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, so maybe you're getting into a situation where you're the biological parent and you're bringing a spouse in, right? So the kiddos are with you, and so we're talking to dad. So this would be the lady you're with. Yeah. What could she do to help, right? And so I think right off the bat, like as we talked earlier, be very careful and slow at how fast you introduce this new man. And if you're the man, you better honor that. In fact, you should even say, no, I don't want to do this because I don't want to mess up the water too early, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what the right time is. I think you and I talked a little bit, until you have a high level of certainty that this relationship has some ability to get some roots.
Absolutely. We talked about that before. Some of my regrets. People who introduce somebody into a family situation to the kids when they're just dating without knowing this is the person that I'm seriously considering to marry, I think is the point. And at that point, now you're going to reset that dynamic to see if marriage is really going to work with the kids. There might be oil and water kind of thing.
Yeah.
But this stuff of exposing kids to a lot of serial partners is just, I can't stress it. It's just damaging to kids. I don't care what anybody says.
It creates the confusion and the chaos,
Right.
right? And kids lose they lose their trust with you if you're the biological parent. Like, oh, here comes another one, you know. So now we have to adapt to another one. So
Yeah.
I think it's also important. Like, don't minimize how your kids feel. You know, you can't just say, well, you're going to like this guy. You got to let them say whether they like this guy or not. And so you got to hear them. Obviously, this depends on their age and their experiences of things, but you got to definitely allow your kids to have a level of say as to what they feel about this person.
Yeah.
You can't minimize it. I think it's important that if you're the biological parent, that, excuse the phrase, come hell or high water, you are going to protect them. If they feel like they're going to be stuck out by themselves, and we have seen this before, we've dealt with this where you bring in a new spouse, there's a lot of love there's a lot of excitement, and the kids feel abandoned.
Yeah.
And that's like the last thing you want those kids to experience. So let them know, no, I'm bringing this new guy in, but you guys need to know I'm right here. I've got your back.
Well, and that's interesting because there was a dynamic came up this week. I had two conversations without even meaning to. Mm-hmm. One was talking about how there was the marriage and the blended family, and then they had a biological child, the two of them.
Yep.
And there is an intensity, again, back to that bond. So now you've got the kids over here who see what this can be, or the intensity over here, and now they feel on the outside.
It's a Cinderella syndrome, where all of a sudden we've got these biological, and they're both bonded to this kid, and now we got the others going,
hey,
oh,
what
we're
about us?
second fiddle.
Yeah,
we're second fiddle.
Now we know where we stand.
Yeah,
but that can happen, I believe, even with all kids. You know,
right.
A new child comes along, and everybody's like, you know, so they were the chosen one for a while. They were the lowest on the pecking order. But with a biological and a non-biological parent who then focuses on that one, that's a dynamic to where you're saying the kids may think, well, are we out here? Do we matter anymore?
That's right.
Yeah, when you marry somebody, you become one. Mm-hmm. So that responsibility, you need to look at that just as if you're them.
Yeah.
And they would go to the line. You need to go to the line. If nothing else, for your spouse. You may not, there's time. My mom used to say something. I love you, but I don't always like you. Yeah. You know? So there's those things like what you're talking about. That unconditional says you got to be willing to die.
Yeah.
You know, because your spouse would be the biological, and these are people that are now part of your charge in life, your responsibility that you're taking.
Yeah, that's a big swallow right there. I mean, you might say you can do that, but when you get into it, and you're like, oh, I really feel like I could do that with them? You know, I think just some other things that are important, and you mentioned this before, but if you're the biological parent, showing respect for your ex. And then respecting how the ex and the new man, like that process, like you can't minimize either, because the kids are back here watching everything. And if you trash talk their biological father, you know, that's just going to throw salt onto that wound. But you know, if you don't involve the new dad into some level of relationship, not a relationship, but a connection, that could go bad too, right?
Well, ours is, we've had very little contact.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say with absolute certainty, I have never badmouthed the parent.
Right. Yeah.
Ever. That's not, and I know that hasn't gone both ways. You know, but I decided you just do not do that.
Yeah.
No matter what, you just don't badmouth the parent.
Yeah.
Again, kids they've got their issues to deal with.
Yeah.
Ideally, I know people who have great relationships with the ex, and they can coordinate that. That wasn't our case.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you kind of got to contain. There was a time in ours where you'd have to contain some damage. You have to limit some of the effects.
Yeah, have a boundary, know how far you can go. I think one of the great things that we've been able to establish with our kid's biological dad is a solid working relationship. where,
that's
where
great.
he and I communicate. We text back and forth. We occasionally call. We'll check on the kids together. Hey, here's what's going on. I just want you to know. And he has an interest in doing that. So that was a definite fear. Like, okay, these kids start having a relationship with him, and we're oil and water with him.
Yeah.
Now we really
you got problems.
Get messy.
Yeah.
So
you know what? You think sometimes things are difficult. I was talking to a relative and hadn't kept up with their daughter, and she got married, and the ex was an opioid addict and bipolar. So they had 2 kids prior. She and her husband had a child, and the mother started turning the kids against the child. And the kids started abusing their child. So she actually moved out for 5 years.
Wow.
And they had a relationship separate to where once her child got old enough, and then eventually the mother overdosed. But she created so much turmoil in there. And I thought, what a dedication. She loved her husband. And they had a child together. They were committed to the marriage. But for 5 years, they maintained 2 separate households. Till the chaos. So, and I'm not saying that that's going to be your reality, but again, you're marrying if there's an ex involved, you're marrying that person too, to some degree. They're a member of your family.
Yeah.
So I would, if you can get that to a workable situation prior.
Yeah.
We didn't even try. So it was just, again, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It would be ideal to do that beforehand.
Yeah. Hey, let's boil this down. All right. I think one thing I want to say to all of this is, I know, like at Rock Solid Families, it doesn't have to be Rock Solid Families. It could be any good counselor setting. We actually help people with this beforehand. This, professionally speaking, getting help beforehand with this is as important as like premarital work.
Oh, yeah, probably more so.
Yeah, because a lot of people, love is blind, as we talked about before. They go in and there's a lot of lust, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of these things going on, and I don't want to minimize the importance. Those are good. Those are the initial. Those are the flames. Now that's kindling, right? Now I need to get some good lumber in there to burn. And so Linda and I actually go through a process of, okay, let's just go through some fundamental building here. Like, what are some foundation things? Just to expose a lot of what you and I have talked about today.
Right.
Like, how have you thought about this? How will you go through this? I think that is a big takeaway that would be helpful to get some help before the damage is done.
And something we didn't talk about here today, which is a big factor, finances.
Oh, yeah, huge.
You know, you're going into a marriage, your finances are not yours anymore, obviously, if you get married. But now you've got an extra dynamic here that it's already up and running. How do you agree, what is, and it sounds silly, I mean, because a family would come together, you got these expenses. But if it's your money, that you're in for a shock.
Well, that's where prenups and all that stuff get weird and come into these things.
So I think more than anything, I've said it over and over again, it's going to deal with your pride. If you are a selfish person, and I have been, if you are a self-centered kind of person, and I have been, if you like your territory, and I do, you're going to be tested in all those things.
Yeah. So, guys, hopefully we didn't scare you off, or maybe it is good that we scared you off. I don't know.
You should think.
You should think long and hard. You should go through the work. Maybe that's probably a better way. Go through the work. Do the heavy lifting as much as possible beforehand. Don't make assumptions that this is easy loading. It's just not. I mean, because there's so many pieces to this puzzle, right? And so I would just say, and Carl, you can say what you need to say there. Like, I would say, like, first off, blended families are not bad. We are called to be adopted in the family of God, right?
Yeah,
and
we're
he
blended
loves
families.
us, right? He loves us even though we're knuckleheads and we do all this. And so he deals with our pride. And so these kids can use that other parent figure, and there can be unity. There can be great strength and health. But I would say don't underestimate the mountain that you're getting ready to climb. But if you prepare well, I think it's very climbable. Obviously, we see many success stories. But anyway, just a heads up on all those different things.
I would
You got
strongly,
something there?
I would strongly suggest, and this wasn't meant to be a commercial for you, but I would strongly suggest if a family is looking at your blended family and you are or thinking about it, to do exactly what you said.
Yeah.
We did not do that. I think there were dynamics that we should have been a little bit more aware of in thinking that love conquers all. So, I think Come see you and Linda. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, get some help. Open your eyes. So anyway, guys, thanks a lot for listening. We want to thank our sponsors again. We want to thank Quality Auto Mart, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and 4Speed on 50 Diner. So we want to thank all those guys. We also want to thank you listeners out there. This is a big, with divorce rates at the level that they are, blended family is just a super big reality.
Yeah.
And so this topic, as we said, it's at least 40% of the population out there is somehow dealing with this. And so hopefully we can do better in this topic.
Well, one last thing I'd say on that. When we say blended family, I believe in marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not shacking up, not living together and things like that.
Man,
that's a whole different dynamic.
Show we could go to, yeah.
But blended family is a married family.
Yeah, I just got to say, living together in the blended family, so in other words, you don't marry it, is extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
It is extremely dangerous. I'm not telling you that from a textbook. I will tell you, you are probably going to do some major damage to, especially the kids, maybe others, but when we see that, we kind of we shudder in our office like, oh my gosh, look what this is a time bomb here.
Yeah.
So great point that you brought up there. All right. Well, we want to thank you for listening to Strong Dads. Why don't you go out there and be a strong dad? Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart and Service for being a proud sponsor of the Strong Dads podcast. Started in 1985 and going strong for all these years. Recently, Quality Auto Mart has transitioned from owners of Mark and Nancy Repke to longtime employee Fred and Lorene Venus. For all your automotive needs and golf cart needs, check out Quality Auto Mart, located across from Indian Lakes on Highway 46 outside of Batesville, Indiana. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.